I'll try to join the audience. Okay. People are coming in. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Or good morning for some. Well, let us know in the chat where you are joining from. And if you are on LinkedIn, drop your handles in the chat. Oh, this is from Chicago. What about you, Troy? Where are you joining from? Yeah. And while we are waiting for more folks to come in, I am curious to know what's one word to describe your mood right now? Well, as for me, I'm joining for the Philippines, and I am feeling grateful today. Grateful to have you all here. What about you, Tom, Tiff, and Eric?
I think my one word is highly caffeinated. Or is that two words? Exactly.
Highly caffeinated. You must have a lot of energy today, Tiff. Well, very perfect for our hot takes show today. Optimistic. Yeah.
Yeah, Menorca. Beautiful.
I love it. I'd love to join you there, Kai.
Yeah, I've wanted to try to surf this beaches off of Tel Aviv at one point. I've heard amazing things about it, but I've never been able to make it there. Each trip has somehow gotten canceled.
Let's see, Paris. Salut, Palais. Baptiste. There we go. Salut.
We have Elizabeth from Ohio.
Yeah, I don't want Ohio to feel left out as we're sitting here talking about Israel and Spain and France. Yes. The Midwest represents. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think we are ready to get started. All right. Hello again, guys. Welcome to the GTM Hot Takes Show, Episode 10, Outsourcing SDRs will be the new norm. I'm Harriet, Partner Success Manager here at Fab Genius. Before we dive in, a huge thank you to our incredible sponsor, Seamless.ai, for making this conversation possible. Seamless.ai helps you connect directly with your ideal customers so you can build your sales pipeline, shorten your sales cycle, and close more deals all at scale. We've got an incredible lineup of speakers today. Tom Slocum, founder and CEO of SD Labs, Tiffany Gonzalez, GTM expert and advisor, Eric Charles, fractional CMO, CRO, and advisor for scaling startups. But before we jump in, just a couple of housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and we'll share the replay after the show. If you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A tab. We will make sure that they are covered during the session. All right, I'll hand it over to Tom now to kickstart the session.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here with the Rev Genius fam. As she said, I'm Tom Slocum, founder of the SD Lab. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about what actually built the pipeline in 2025 and kind of talk a little bit about hot takes when it comes to outsourcing the SDR motion, right? Do we do it? Don't we do it? What's the risk? What are the kind of the concerns around that? And a couple hot takes around it. So We've got 4 hot takes. We've got real receipts. Your questions on deck. Feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll bring them in. But I do have with me Tiffany Gonzalez, fractional GTM exec, and then Eric. Tiff, do you want to kick us off with a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Good morning. So we can call we can call it a GTM expert, fractional executive and advisor running my own firm. But I think the big background is I'm an operator. I'm hands-on, and I've over many years have done everything from carry a bag to run sales, marketing, BI analytics, data engineering teams across some smaller companies and across some very big ones that you guys have probably heard of, like AWS and Amazon and Microsoft and Coupang in South Korea. So that's me. I love taking beautiful theory and finding practical applications for it, and then testing and throwing away what doesn't work.
Very nice. Eric, what about you?
Eric Charles, also a fractional CMO, CRO. Actually, Tiffany and I have got remarkably overlapping backgrounds. Carried a bag at one point, found myself in marketing because I got frustrated that the materials the so-called marketing department was giving me were atrocious. Then found myself in charge of marketing for a couple startups. Spent 13 years at Exactly, growing from 100 employees to, on the New York Stock Exchange to being owned by Vista Equity Partners. Had some fun with that. And nowadays, I've hang my hat in a couple different places. One with my own consulting practice for very small companies that are trying to get past that $1 million growth rate, if not launch into, how do we actually build a sales and marketing organization? And then also with Ohana Operators, where we work with family offices and help them steer their investments. I get involved in their investments, shall we say, have gone a little sideways in something, typically because, once again, great products just don't quite know how to take it out in the space. And finally, this time of year, I spend most of my time redesigning people's commission plans. And that's that 13 years at Exactly, and before that, Calidus.
Very nice. Very nice. Comp plans are always a good time right around this time of the year, right? Everybody wants to get paid next year. Goals go up, pay gets less, and everybody's all like, what are we doing?
And I cut your territory in half, by the way, because, we're growing so well. So great year last year. Now you can have the west side of the 5, but not all the way to the 405 for anybody who knows Southern California.
Yes, 100%. Well, awesome. It's a pleasure to have you both here as we kind of dive into these hot takes. Before we get started, the one thing I wanted to do is I just want to see where the room is before we kind of fight about it and kind of get into this discussion. So if anybody in the chat can let me know what's your SDR motion today? Is it in-house only? Is it mostly in-house, mostly outsourced only? Or are you rebuilding, right? Kind of what is your SDR motion today where you're at? And then that way we can kind of just see where the room is before we dive in here. So drop that in there, in-house, cool. So a lot of in-house, rebuilding, got it, perfect. So we're gonna dive into the first take. Are you guys ready for this? This one's pretty bold. This is pretty crazy. So we're gonna dive in. The first hot take here is, are outsourced SDRs drive predictable scale at half the cost of in-house teams? So you're looking at the fixed overheads of hiring, training, ramp time apparently vanish when you outsource, Tiffany. Where today's agencies are delivering multi-channel outbound data stacks, Q&A, right? So what I want to ask you, Tiffany, as we kick off here, where does outsourcing win versus kind of blowing up from your operator lens?
Gosh, I think one of my favorite things in the world is magical thinking. And while I, appreciate the bold statement by these different areas, I think this is a bit magical thinking, right? I've run in-house teams, I've run outsourced teams, and the big difference is where your overhead and where your costs land, right? Your in-house teams, you have different types of fixed costs, training, physical seats if you're not doing remote work, all of these phones on the desk, landlines, computers. You have all of those normal employee assets that happen when you have an in-source team, right? When you have an outsourced team, all of those things happen. They just happen differently. So your costs shift to that outsourced organization. They have to get the butts in seats. They have to do the recruiting, the hiring, the training. All of those things are still true, but they're managed differently. And so that's not half of the cost, because if you want quality, if you want the type of high caliber that you can have in-house, your biggest cost is really making sure that your GTM motion across your entire business is inclusive of not only outsourced teams, but it's very, very clear about how you're driving time to value, how you're driving your motion so that it's not fragmented and broken, which infinitely scales the cost regardless of whether it's in-house or or outsourced. So I think that those are the kind of the major talking points. I love pithy, comments and pithy sentences and stuff like that. But I think that there's a lot of nuance in this one.
A lot of agreed. For you, Eric, is it cost reduction or is it just like a cost shift, right? What does the math say when you kind of include the ramp, the tooling, the turnover, when you think about this for yourself?
And that's exactly what this is a classic, like, one sentence test, question on a final exam that you've got to pick apart every single word, and the first is define predictable and define scale. What are we measuring this outsource on? I hired an outsourced team once where I was willing to pay them $500 for meetings held. Now that was a lot more than I paid my SDRs, because my SDRs had a base salary. The rest of the cost, a lot of the costs that Tiffany was mentioning, the nice thing is with voice over IP and a laptop and the like, I laugh about the death of the desk phone sometimes. And I found in a box as I was cleaning my garage over the weekend, an old headset that I had bought myself that hooked up into my desk phone so I could do calls all day long. Something that, now everybody's just walking around with their latest AirPods that disconnect 5 times when they're trying to make a call. Let's not go down that path, shall we, with Apple? So I do think you can get some great scale and if you negotiate the contract properly with your outsourced organization, and this is where I start picking on Mr. Slocum here, but it's like, the reason why I paid $500 is because I refused to pay a retainer. I said, no, you called me up, you claimed you had this stuff and you want $3,000 a month for me, no matter what. No, I'll pay you more for actual held meeting, but I'm not paying you a retainer. If I'm going to pay a retainer, I might as well just have my own SDRs, because they're a sunk cost too. And this is not you, sorry. When I say you folks, I have not done business with Mr. Slocum, although I will quite possibly bring him in to some of my clients in the future. But I hate this. Like, we want you to sign a 6-month contract with a $3,000 a month retainer and then pay us for every meeting held. I'm like, I might as well go ahead and train somebody, because I'm going to have to train your people anyway. Now, it's nice not to deal with the HR issues. So I sometimes feel like with outsourced SDRs, what I'm really doing is outsourcing somebody else to fire someone that I really like, but just can't produce, which is I would say possibly 1/3 of the angst of running a sales or marketing organization is letting go of poor performers.
Yeah. I think it's a very spicy take here from both of you. And I think the conclusion is, right, it's costs don't vanish. They shift for us, right? The real win is the speed and focus that comes from it. I've ran pods for 30 plus companies in the last 2-3 years doing this. And when it hits, we're able to compress that ramp from 8 weeks to, 2 weeks, right? We plug into your stack day one. We can start kind of having conversations while you're still screening those SDR resumes. But to your point, retainer versus pay for performance, that's always a battle, right? I've had many of those conversations with many clients on, well, just give us the guarantee, whatnot. But I think the funny part of this hot take is, can you drive predictable scale at half the cost, right? There's a lot of nuances to that.
I was gonna add to this and just say, in my past, Like I've hired and scaled very large outsourced teams, and I've held those headcount inside of my organization as well, right? And I honestly don't make any difference of cost between my internal teams and my outsourced SDRs. I budget for those things generally quite equally, right? So
Yeah.
I think the biggest question for me is, if I'm going to make a question of, do I keep these headcount inside my organization, or do I outsource? The question is, do I have the capability to grow an internal team? Because when I'm growing an internal team, let's pretend I need to go hire 300 sales reps or even 30 sales reps, right? Do I have the capacity inside of my hired organization to do all of the logistics that are required to set these individuals up for success? If the answer is no, then you need to go find a correct and a high quality outsourced partner. And from a budgeting perspective, I'm not going to assume that I spend any less money on that outsourced partner than I do on my internal headcount. That would be an incorrect assumption. There are cost savings opportunities, but you shouldn't go through that motion with that perspective. You should really say, hey, I'm going to spend equally, but the reason why I'm doing this is because I have my team focused on other areas of the business, or we don't have the capacity to scale in a way that is fast enough, meets our demand, is integrated enough, et cetera. Because if you're going to go hire 30 outsourced SDRs, think of standing that up internally. How many managers do you have to hire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Well, and also, and we had talked about this randomly over chat. I did some analysis years ago. 20% of reps bring in 80% of revenue, and that was a massive data set. I worked with Alan Benson up in Minneapolis on that one at the Carlson School of Management, and then EBSTA talks about that 16% of SDRs bring in 80% of revenue. So some of this outsourcing, I can't hide how much. The nice thing the outsourcer does for us is, like I said, they can go deal with the SDRs that don't produce, because that's the only thing we lose though when we outsource, but I want those high producers, because those are the ones I want to take off the bench and move them up into AE at some point. So that's the thing that scares me about the SDRs is, if I outsource it, now my hiring motion for account executives has shifted, because I'm a big believer of give them 12 to 18 months as an SDR and then start letting them taste what it does it take to actually close.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Awesome. So we got a couple questions from the chat here. Ben, we'll bring a few in at the end. And actually, Ben, to your question, what's the latest with all these SDR AI tools, agents, right? Is that the future, or will we still need a human in the loop? We're actually going to talk about that. That is one of our hot takes, is obviously this AI replacement. I think with this, right, in this first hot take, we can all agree it's not half the cost. It's not driving predictable scale or anything. It's just that these things shift. It just depends on what you're going to do. I personally believe that an outsourced SDR team can do a lot for an organization at really half the cost, right? That's my kind of take on it, is you can go in-house to what you both said. You can budget, but that's going to be $9 to $12K a month in all those expenses. You've got a 6 to 8 week ramp, tools, manager time, all those things you guys were mentioned, where you could do an outsource pod for under 8K a month, right? And they're live in 10 to 14 days max. You've got QA, you've got data, you've got multi-channel. With that, you're just buying outcomes and iteration speed. You're not really buying the headcount. So that's kind of our top take there. But we are going to move into one that always cracks me up. This one really is a good one. Your brand voice dies the moment you outsource SDRs. It's as if your brand voice just packs its bags and dies the second an SDR has a different zip code. So it's really funny to me. But let's be real. Your brand voice doesn't die because someone's in, Texas or in Latin America, El Salvador. It dies when your enablement sucks. If your story can't survive outside of your four walls, it was never strong really to begin with. And so, that's where I kind of want to talk with you guys on. Tiff, what's your take? How do you how do you maintain this message quality when it is outside of your kind of direct control per se, when you are bringing in these teams?
Yeah, gosh, on points like this, I always think, when you're pointing at something, if you point your hand at something, how many fingers are pointing back at yourself? Like this is
Right.
whatever that quote is. I always forget. I'm really bad unless I write them down, and I'm horrible at telling jokes as well. But for this point, this is really a very self-reflective statement, right? If your brand voice dies in any circumstance, whether that's insourced or outsourced or anything, then you need to work on that. That's reflection of broken systems, broken processes, and lack of clarity inside your internal organizations, right? And that's where you would really have to take a step back to reflect and look at things like, how do you give your team clarity, alignment, and trust? And I'm saying your team, which is inclusive of outsourced teams. How do you give them that clarity, that alignment, and that trust so that they are able to really clearly communicate why, right? Why you're talking to me about this product, about this service, about this company. What are the values of this, right? Because if that is something that you're clear on internally, that communicates, right? And I think it's really a super important topic, but it's really reflective of gaps in organizations if they're having this challenge.
Agreed. Go ahead.
I think it also comes into in that enablement, what are you selling? What are you trying to book? What are you trying to get out of somebody? It's one thing. I've hired outsourced SDR types at booths, and I would like to be very clear, not the stereotypical that used to happen in the tech industry, but people that could come and just hustle to get people to come over to the booth so we could scan their badges. That was easy. I mean, I could do that 30 minutes before the floor opened, remind them, here are the top 3 things to talk about, and to pass on the conversation as soon as possible. I'd use my SDRs for that. And I'd sometimes use outsourced SDR types. I know they're not true SDRs, but what was their job? Get me a meeting. Single product, single event, fantastic. As soon as it starts getting more complex, and this gets into company culture, and it depends on who you're working with. I've worked with companies where their culture was bluntly irrelevant. They stood on their products, not on their people. And I've worked at companies where the people were so critical. And I think that can have the issue on this. Does your brand voice die? I don't know. Is your brand your company? Do you have a cult of personality and a CEO? Larry Ellison, Mark Benioff, going back to, as one of the old guys here, Scott McNeely of Sun. There you had a cult, you had a brand that was heavily predicated on the leaders, the founders. But if we go to the other direction, maybe it's a classic Ford Mustang. I can't even tell you who the CEO of Ford is right now for the current Mustangs. I just know they still make them, so I'm happy as a Detroit Iron guy. So which one is it? And that's going to have an impact on your enablement. If your enablement team is trying to sell an outsourced SDR on how amazing the culture is at the company, they're a contractor. Maybe they'll listen up. But if you're trying to sell them on, this is why this product matters to this persona that we are asking you to call, I think that can be very effective. I think it's got to be narrow. It's going to be targeted. It has to be focused.
Well, and Eric, this is a really good place where AI tools can really step in and help augment whatever that outsourced motion is to help get more accurate, right? So that's where those call listening tools, sentiment analysis, knowledge sharing. Hey, this type of script is working really well. This customer has had these types of engagements. So that way, when whomever the rep is and whatever the product, when they're engaging with it, they have augmented information that allows them to enter into a conversation with the most information possible, right? And that's where a lot of these AI tools become really, really helpful, The challenge with that, of course, is have you set up your GTM end-to-end process to be able to empower those things? Because if it's slow and it doesn't get to the person at the right time in the right place, it's irrelevant, even if you have the tool in the background.
Yeah. And I think it's just, again, it just comes back to enablement. I don't think that your brand voice can really die. It's, look, like I said, I've worked with teams from Mexico to the Philippines who sound more on brand than the reps that were sitting internal. And that's just because, again, it comes down to the enablement. Most of these outsourced partners, you have to really qualify, you have to really talk to and understand how they're going to work with you. But when they're trained on ICP, they've listened to real calls, and they got feedback loops every week, then it's able to keep that brand in control, right? We've done a better job than internal teams. I've worked with many orgs that didn't have all that sentiment. They haven't even tried their market yet. It depends on where they're at, right? Some have no intel. They have no information. And so we have to go out there and test it for them. Then there's other orgs where I've onboarded them in 3 days or less because they're like, here's an entire Google Drive, Tom. Here's everything we have for our brand. We just need you to go book the meetings. And I was able to get that over to my reps and guarantee that passion, right? You got to pass off that passion. And again, because they're outsourced, they're not right there and they're not internal, they still have to be bought in. And so in our onboarding, we make sure we get your ICP, your objections that you face, what your mission is. And just because you're staying in-house doesn't mean passion, doesn't guarantee passion. I've found that sometimes the more outsourced people have actually kicked butt versus the internal people, because they couldn't even, the in-house people couldn't even tell me their own company's mission. They couldn't even tell me. I'd be like, hey, what are you going for? And they're like, I don't know, but then we could give it to them. And they're like, what are you seeing? We ran parallel with the team over the summer and we actually kicked their butt, right? Because we were more drilled in. And to your point, Tiffany, with the AI tools, I'm able to take all the calls they had, all their collateral, and I'm able to empower my reps and my side of the house to go out there and book a meeting. Right? When you're outsourcing, people are way too wrapped up in it. They're trying to book meetings for you. We're not here to sell the product for you. We're not trying to close the deal on the call. We're trying to grab your market's attention. And that's where I think people miss is if your brand voice can grab attention, you're in a good spot, but you have to figure out how do we make these outsourced SDRs almost brand evangelists with receipts, right? And they can go to market, they can grab attention and drive those meetings for you. So I'd argue here in this one, I don't think outsourcing kills your voice. It exposes whether you've ever had one. And that's where,
I want to drop in, and it came to me, and I think we didn't dig into this in our earlier conversations. I wonder if one of the advantages of the outsourced organization is professional management because of their stake in the game. Because one of the toughest things I've seen in organizations is who is the SDR manager? And how many people want to stay in an SDR organization as opposed to moving into sales and are willing to stay and manage the SDRs. And that could be with your organization, you've made this the core, which gets you on that. Because I've definitely gone into some clients and like, well, who manages your SDRs? That person over in marketing, we just gave it to them because we felt they had the bandwidth.
Yeah, I'm coming to a lot of orgs with that. They don't really have somebody overseeing it. It's kind of a broken fragment on there. So they can't even get the enablement they also need internally, right? Because they're just kind of, Kai said in the comments here, they even were an outsourced SDR for giant SAP, right? Their sales team didn't even know they were external or a contractor. That's how it should feel. That's why I pride myself in our model is I'm literally your dedicated partner. We're meeting every week. We're connected via Slack. We're going through proper onboarding, and your prospects and you wouldn't even know that your SDR is outsourced, right, or not a part of your mission. And again, it's just buying into that as a collective whole. Because trust me, in the last 2-3 years doing all of this, there are some really bad outsourced lead gen organizations, and it's not great. It's more set it and forget it. Your brand voice does die that moment because they just don't care. They are, in a sense, doing the generic scripts. They're like, oh, we've worked with all organizations like you. Don't worry, we have the playbook. And it's just like, we want to come in and be your partner in crime. And yes, there are some ingredients where there are some similarities in once I've worked with one, I can kind of figure out how the others will run. But you have to be unique to their story, right? Like if me and Eric work together, it's like, all right, Eric, you're in here. How can I help you though with your brand voice and what you're trying to convey with your people? I have some ideas and I have some structure and formulas, but let's work it out together, right? And collaborate over the next few weeks. That's why I always tell people that first month when you outsource, it is a lot of testing and iteration before that funnel can really get taken off. By month 2, month 3, you should start to see those wins, and you know if you have a partner or not, right? Then it's like, okay, we're here. So I agree with you both. So what would you guys both say? Brand voice doesn't die. It's more an enablement thing. It's more on kind of how you're structuring it. We all agree kind of tone matters. It's just the real question is who's responsible for keeping it sharp, right? And going into that. So would you guys agree?
I would say it's an enablement issue. I will say I feel and I can't back this with data, which bothers me. It's easier for me to fix enablement when it's in-house because I can go sit in the bullpen and say, what the hell are you saying on that call? Versus an outsource kind of a thing. That would be my only caveat. I feel like I can turn the ship a little bit easier if there's a bullpen sitting in Tulsa and I just have to fly out there for a week and listen in.
Yeah, because it's tough, right? Because if a whole week goes by and you check in with your partners and you're like, hey, we didn't get any meetings this week, and they're like, oh yeah, we had a little bit of struggle this week, and then you go and potentially listen to those calls, it's already too late, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, why didn't you guys reach out to me or let me know, or why couldn't I have known that 3 days ago before we just wasted a whole week with a 0 week on the board, right? Yeah. And I think that's where it's just different. See, in our model, you guys get all of that, right? In ours, we're giving you the call recordings. You can access them at any time. We're meeting. We're talking you through. When we book the meeting, we're even sending the call recording for you, right? So you can hear and get the context of what happened. Because a lot of times you get those outsourced that they just book meetings to book meetings because they're on that pay per model, right? And they're doing certain things that it's like, you can get 30 meetings in the month, Eric, but are they going to be quality, right? Because they're just chasing a number. Right. So I agree. I think it's not the outsourcing so much that hurts the brand voice. I think it's the inconsistent enablement that comes from that. And that's where, the whole problem is. All right, now we're going to hit number 3. This one is a good one as well. So our hot take here, this one always hits a nerve, on this side of it. But this one's my jam because the best outbound orgs I've seen aren't really choosing sides. They're orchestrating. But this one is only hybrid models survive. You have to do an outsourced SDRs with in-house guardrails. Now, the hybrid model isn't a theory. It's what's already kind of working. We all 3 probably have seen it, right? Internal SDRs own your high context strategic plays. The ABM, the tier 1s, the warm follow-ups, where what you were mentioning earlier, Eric, is the outsourced pods can kind of handle the more heavy lifting of event promos, the cold list mining, the dormant accounts. They could do some volume testing there. And we've done that, right? We did that with Distrain and with Rockledge, and their internal teams handled a lot of the top accounts, right? The big stuff, where my external crew, we filled the middle of the funnel for them. The key was we had to do weekly stand-ups, we had a shared dashboard, and a single enablement hub that we could all kind of orchestrate together. With that, we added a 20 to 30% lift in their qualified meetings, and they didn't have to add any headcount, right? Any internal head to that. They kept what they had. They were able to run with the top part, and then we were able to kind of go through all the minutia, all the other stuff in there. And so I don't think, the mistake leaders make is trying to fully outsource or fully own. Hybrid wins just because it creates it just helps you flex capacity without breaking your band. So I'm curious for both of you, when you're scaling GTM and you come in with these clients and you're working through it, where does hybrid fit into that roadmap? Do you ever think, that hybrid fits into your model at any point, Tiff, when you're looking at these organizations? Like you've said before, brand consistency matters most, but how do you kind of keep that layered in there?
Yeah, so this one, I find the hypothesis or the statement interesting, and that this is a very declarative statement that only one way works. And I think the problem I have with this one is that, not all companies are alike. Not all companies have the same sales motion. Not all companies have the same skills and tools and enablement, understanding. Some companies know how to work, manage outsourced vendor relationships really, really well. Others have no idea how to do it, right? So this one is very dependent on your company and what skills, what attributes, what are the needs of your business, what are the needs of your go-to-market motion, and then really, and I think I say this in every conversation I have ever, is how are you tracking impact and not just activity? Because there is still, unfortunately, this conception that, outsourced organizations are the people who are dialing for dollars, and it's all about volume, and it's all about that type of business, which is very much incorrect, right? Outsourced organizations, if they're going to be impactful and if they're going to truly augment your team, it has to be focused on areas where your team cannot scale either fast enough or you have outsized demand and you're focusing your internal teams to close and convert that demand once it reaches a certain maturity stage in your GTM. So I feel like this one is very much one that is also reflective of the company, and that there's neither here nor there. You have to figure out what works for you and then make sure that you're operationalizing it across your entire stack, including metrics and tools, so that it's successful, right? And I feel like this is also like almost a subset of the hot take number one, and that it really is, a bit more detailed in that operational aspect.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ish.
No, I was going to say, I'll throw away the word only. I think hybrid can work very, very well. And it really gets into what we want to avoid is channel conflict. I don't need my internal SDR team where I've got a couple of rock stars that, again, and I beat this drum a lot, who I'm looking at to be AEs, maybe SMB AEs next, angry with me because the outsourced team, quote, stole a deal from them. So having that guardrail, I think, is important. At the same time, you talk about, like, I think about, there's a big event coming up, and you know what? We want people, what a great time to hit our entire database of anybody we have ever scanned in the last 5 years who went to that event and encourage them to come by the booth, get a t-shirt, get a squishy toy, get a whatever the hot thing is right now, enter the drawing for a Yeti, and the like. I've got a closet full of Yetis thanks to events. So that can work well because your internal team doesn't have the bandwidth to hit every single one of those people. And phone calls and at least semi-personalized emails matter, not raw ones. Then there's the inbound side of it. Inbounds, I mean, this is where I'm going to quote Oldroyd's research at MIT, where you've got less than 5 minutes to respond to a lead that came in because someone filled out a form on your website. I got to make sure that happens and figuring out the best way that happens. And that might be a hybrid where maybe I've got a West Coast United States team, but I've got a lead that came into France, to go back to our friends, or Spain, since we've got both of those represented on this call, and Israel and London. Maybe I've got an outsourced team in Europe to make sure that we don't sit on it. Because look, if somebody's on your website, they're interested in you right now. If you wait until the US wakes up, it's too late. You've lost the lead. It's burned. The chance of response drops precipitously after 5 minutes. And that's where I think this hybrid model can work, to give yourself a global reach, a global coverage for inbounds, but also for spikes and weaves. And I don't know how you deal with that, Mr. Slocum, with your clients, but like I could totally see, hey, I want to dial it up because I've got 10,000 scans coming out of this event, and I got to make sure everybody gets a nice warm phone call to book a meeting right now. I don't want to wait for my team to get through it all.
I actually have done that with Rockledge, working with the two sales guys there and the founder. They actually did that. They had an event and there was only two of them and they couldn't get through all of it. So I took it on for them. He was like, can I send you that list? Can you enrich it? Can you go call those people? Because we have to get to them in the next 48 hours. And me and Matt can't do that. We're just not going to have the time. So they kicked it over to us and we were able to book 5-6 meetings in there, right? So it works. And I think to your point, it's just, you can have the hybrid model. You can do it. And it's just a matter of what levers you want to pull within there and kind of allocating that to that. I don't think you reduce friction with it and you can increase flow, right? You can do webinars, you can do events, you can do cold lists that you don't want your reps touching. You can make them more methodical in-house to work on those strategic things, right? And some of the minutia, you could just outsource, right? The future outbound org is modular. Plug in what you need when you need it, right? And hybrid, kind of running this model turns your GTM into a living system, not just a static org chart where you're like, oh, SDRs here, AEs here. You can pull different levers. I've done a lot of just kind of sample projects with people, even when trying to pitch them to bring us in as outsourced. I'm like, you know what? Let's start smaller. I've got an SDR already. Why don't you give me something small for us to test run with you? Do you have the last 90 days, all of your to be revisiteds, right, that you haven't touched? Why don't we go reach out to those and see if we can't book you 2 or 3 real quick? They'll be like, go do that. And so then it's kind of just doing that. Go ahead, Tiff.
Yeah, no, so I'm gonna add and I'm gonna push back on a couple of things here. Because why not? That's why we're doing this. So I think that we need to also be very conscious of how sales is changing and how technology is really making us sell differently. When we think about hybrid models or direct or completely outsourced, we also have to think of a lot of these tools that are becoming available to us, autonomous revenue engines, and there are incredible startups that I know that Rev Genius team is aware of, and I'm aware of, and others that are driving nurture of people hitting websites, of clicking on certain things, that are helping with pre-qual, that are helping recognize that customers don't always want to talk to someone immediately, but you still have to follow up in a very relevant amount of time, right? And so I know, I'm sure there's going to be an AI question coming up here shortly. But we really have to think about these, whether it's an autonomous revenue engine like ScaleStack or so many of the others that are out there, or if you're working on agentic workflows inside of whatever tool that you guys are using, it's really changing how you engage. And it then, for outsourcing partners, if you're doing that, it makes the work they're doing different, right? And so I think that we need to be really clear that what an SDR was yesterday, whether it's in-house or out-of-house, is very different than what it is today. Recognize that change, but also then understand the core of what that person is doing, which is building relationships, following up on certain motions, etc. That still stays the same. But instead of the SDR doing all of it, there's a lot of other tools that augment and help make that entire thing more effective and more focused.
Agreed. And so with that, right, we talked about hybrid models, and that, the real hybrid that's coming isn't just the in-house and outsourced. It's what you just said. It's the tech stack. It's all of this. It's humans, AI, outsourced, in-house, pulling this all together, because if your SDR team still looks the same as it did in 2022, 2018, you're already behind, right? So with that, that's why we dive into this one. We've all been waiting for it. AI is replacing SDRs. This is the hottest topic. You can talk about this on LinkedIn at any given minute and generate hundreds of likes because people have a lot of opinions. And where Tim said, right, is you might not even have to outsource to a physical human like outsourced agency. You can outsource to tech, right? It doesn't even mean I could just outsource to some tech and have some of this stuff done. To your point, Eric, maybe I just want to run some outreach to just these webinar folks. I don't need to bring in a whole team for that, right? I can potentially use some AI, already feed it with some information with my team, and maybe just bring in a tool that can kind of help me, right? Maybe a sales agent can do that. This one's just a really spicy one, the AI SDR takeover, because there's already tools, there's already things that are scraping data, personalizing emails, they're sending DMs. You have orgs even being able to kind of set booked meetings without a human ever touching a keyboard, which is crazy. And so, the real question is AI replacing the SDRs, or is it just exposing the ones who weren't actually selling kind of in the first place, right? That's where I take it. I don't think the AI replaces salespeople. It replaces tasks. The SDR of the future isn't going to be typing emails and cleaning lists. They're orchestrating systems. The tech stack is now the SDR, in my opinion, right? The reps who understand buyer psychology, storytelling, and how to use AI as a leverage, those are the ones that are going to dominate. The ones who can't really adapt to that, they're going to get replaced by the reps who can. So it's not AI versus SDRs. It's SDRs plus AI versus everyone else, right? So from your view, how do you prepare SDRs in these enablement programs for this AI assisted future? How are you taking this to clients and conversations of how do they make this a blend and kind of have these enablement programs built in?
Yeah, I think I'm going to back up a step there. And I think I'm going to say just, yes, AI is replacing SDRs. And
okay.
I know we're going with it.
You're spicy. Okay.
Right. The reason why I say that is that there is an incredible set of tools, many of which are still in their nascency, but that are very, very quickly evolving, that are able to guide a customer through an entire sales workflow, right? They're guiding a customer through engagement, through nurture, through understanding product value, through leading indicators of retention, through understanding reasons for success, and why customers may be potentially churning out. AI agents are going to, and in many circumstances already are, doing all of those things, right? The question is going to be, at what point is your tool, your company, your system, your process, at what point does that break? And being able to very easily and quickly identify it so that at that point, the SDR, as we're calling it here, is able to proactively engage with the customer in the space that they are at. So the job changes, right? The job fundamentally changes, which I think is a really powerful thing, because it moves what we traditionally have known as SDRs into really managing relationships, not just from point one or point two, but really engaging with customers in a place where they're able to add really incremental value, right? And it isn't just transactional value. And I think that that's really going to be where this whole thing goes. So as we knew them yesterday, I think it'll eventually disappear. It's going to take a long time, though, because unlike the tech industry, the rest of the world hasn't adopted all of these tools. So is it happening immediately? No. But will it happen? Yeah, we're all going to have to get really creative and very thoughtful about how we build our systems and our sales teams to meet this moment.
Yeah. Eric, from your side, you've seen kind of these GTM tech waves before, right? And if you were staffing a modern SDR org today, what kind of percentage of outreach would you want automated versus kind of that human led if you were looking at it?
I mean, I want the mass outreach. What I don't want is be paying for somebody sitting at a desk writing customized first emails, if not second. I mean, and part of it is I had a great experience with AI. And it was a few years ago where I got an email. I was headed to an analyst summit, and I got invited to meet with, actually, I'll even call him out, Jay-Z at 6 Cents. It was this person said, "Hey, Eric, we saw you on the list. Know you're coming in. Want to know if you had any time to get together, come by our offsite location. I responded the way I respond to emails like that. Yeah, sounds great. Look, I fly in on Sunday, I get in, but I've got a dinner at that point. I've got a breakfast the next day, but I've got a couple slots here. I mean, that's what I did. This was a human talking to me. I talk to them the way I talk to anybody. Highly caffeinated, quickly going. Don't ask me for complete sentences. It's going to be in bullet points. Deal with it. I get a nice response. Looks like there's a slot. Let me bring in Bob to finalize it. And I think that's going to be a secret of the AI coding. It has to know when it's time to bring in a human being who can maybe jump on a conversation. You know, I know nowadays you can send me a Calendly link or equivalency, but it's kind of nice when a human says, okay, great. Does 12:15 work for you? You know, and do you have any dietary restrictions kind of thing? Yeah, I want, you know, prime beef and scotch that's old enough to drink itself. So that's, I think, important. So I think the tasks, you nail it on the tasks, but you've got to have the human coding in there as well. And obviously, just to back up, if your enablement sucks, AI is not going to solve that. You know, if you can't enable the AI,
that goes back to the
terrible outreach. Anyway, the interesting one to me is going to be, so my son was an SDR and is now a director of sales. So he took that career path. And I know that was one of the questions that came in earlier. But I remember, and he was living at home at one point, and it was a Friday morning. I'm like, so what are you working on today? He says, account enhancement. Nobody wants phone calls on Fridays. Now, if all of a sudden AIs are doing enhancement, what's the work week of a human SDR look like if the AI is already taking care of all the enhancements?
Well, especially when
there'll be some fun plays there. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because what do they say? Like, you know, 20% of the day is spent on, you know, most reps aren't even selling, right? When you look at what they do in a day to day, it's admin. It's 80% of their day is just figuring out who the hell to pick up the phone and call in the first place,
right?
Right? Or so that's why like call blitzes fail. They'll go and set up a call blitz. Let's make calls, and they'll spend an hour and nobody will book anything because there's nothing prepped, right? There's no intent in that blitz. It was just, oh, go call for an hour. And so 30 minutes were wasted even getting the list ready to make that call. And so to your point, when you start doing all the task oriented, that's where it's going to be. These reps are not going to be necessarily like an SDR anymore. They're going to have to do their job. They're going to have to work. And that's where they're going to have to be orchestrating their system. They're going to be feeding that AI to get those tasks. They're going to be setting up. It's almost like the SDR is going to become a GTM engineer. They're going to have to, because they're going to have to audit, to your point, they're going to have to set up those conditions and those workflows and set those things up. So that way they can step in when the human part needs to come in. Oh, Eric just got back to me. He's ready to be available. Great. I need to now come in there and ask him, you know, chicken or beef for dinner. Hey, let me give him a call, you know, but the rest to just get it going can really take off, right? That's what I've been doing now with a few teams, is setting up like an ADR versus an SDR, right? To where the ADR is all built through an AI orchestra of account development, a couple, you know, testing of the phone number and email, doing a couple light emails to make sure everything's warmed up and good to go. We score that account. Once that all gets done, then it triggers to the SDR to where now they can go focus on that tier 1 account that's been enriched, had a few soft emails reached out to, and now it's up to them to take ownership of that and run that. So you have this ADR to SDR motion. I did that a few years back, obviously with humans. Now I've been able to build that operating system where it can all be done by AI. Then the SDR can come in over top. So instead of 5,000 accounts, they have 2,000 that are like locked in, and every dial they make, every email they reach out is actually perfect. Like, it's going to land, right? They can pick up the phone and call somebody. So it's just kind of blending that. So I love the takes here. Tiff,
I would, by the way, I would love it if an AI could take over your SDR teams and you stop sending me messages about companies I don't work for or who I only advise or anything like that. That alone, just please.
Yes.
I do read all the inbounds. I accept 90% of LinkedIn requests because someday that SDR might be a CRO and will hire me, you know, for a project.
Yep.
So look, I'm one of those people. I'll freely admit it. I can't afford to say no to a connection, but please focus your outreach a little bit. And my LinkedIn profile is wide open. There is no excuse for bad outreach. Use an AI.
There's not.
I ask you.
Use an AI. Yep. Agreed. All righty. And Tiff, anything on your end to close out that hot take before we close it out here and move on?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here for me is that when we think about AI agents, autonomous revenue engines, as we're building it into our very clear go-to-market. And there was a great question in the chat around, when you're launching into a new market and you have a small team, what do, right? All of these tools become ways for us to test strategy and clarity of message and sales motions at scale, and help ourselves make sure that we are guiding our business in the right direction. It helps us make sure we're not driving something off of a cliff, right? Ultimately, as AI gets better and faster, and we as humans get more comfortable integrating it into our processes, we're going to have the ability to really use this in a way I don't think we can imagine yet, right? Because we're at the beginning of this. And I think that that's really the most important thing here. When we talk about declarative statements like AI replacing SDRs, the question in my mind is, maybe it does, right? Absolutely. What do I need to do to experiment to understand what works best for my sales motion and prove it to be not true, right? Rather than trying to prove it's true, what is the data that shows that that's not where my customers are at today or where my product is at today, right? And does that matter? How does that make me change my sales motion? So I think that in a culture of experimentation across sales organizations, across revenue ops, sales enablement, across all of these teams, I think those are going to be the organizations that really break through in a very meaningful way, and are really going to be able to take this, whatever AI is able to deliver to us right now and in the future. I think that's what's really going to take us to the next level.
That's what I'm most excited about, is the organizations that are willing to embrace it, that want to test things, that want to lead the front. They don't want to stay with the same, playbook that ran and the predictable revenue model and all these things. Outbound has changed, right? It hasn't died by any means. None of the channels have died. It's just that the playbook is different now. You can have outsource for scale, hybrid for flexibility, AI for leverage, and human for connection. And if you can bring in those 4 elements into your org, you'll build a GTM motion that really never runs out of gas. It doesn't matter what trend or tech hits next. You've got those things, right? You've got those options. You're willing to test. You're willing to play around. And to your point, Tiff, AI is just getting started. AI could absolutely replace SDRs in the next decade, in my opinion, because of how much, and I think they can, because I've always set it up. To your guys' point, and the way the SDR role is set up is very replaceable because of just the admin crap that they do. The RevOps isn't doing a lot for them. To what David said earlier, every rep can tell you, all I want to do is focus on more meetings, more conversations, more deals closed. I don't want to deal with the noise of all the other stuff. And so the orgs that can do that can set you up. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in today. Got a couple good hot takes on this. Appreciate Tiff and Eric for everything you guys shared, and we're going to bring in the Rev Genius team to kind of close this out for us. But if Tiff and Eric, you guys can drop your LinkedIn's, the fun times, into the chat so people can reach out to you guys, ask them further questions. I know there was a lot of the questions in here, but I'll hand it off back over to the Rev Genius team, and thank you all for coming through.
All right.
There we go.
That's a wrap. A huge thank you to you, Tom, Tiffany, and Eric. And of course, thank you to everyone who joined us today live. A big shout out again to our sponsors, Seamless.ai, for powering today's conversation. We'll be sending out the replay shortly, so keep an eye on your email. And thank you again for spending your time with us. And we'll see you at the next GTM Hot 6 show. Good night, everyone. Bye.